distinguished academicians, both from this and from other institutes, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to today's Institute lecture. The annual Institute lecture series of IIEST Shibpur was initiated by the director, Professor Ajay Kumar Ray, in October 2014 to enrich the academic ambience of the institution. There are 6 lectures in a cycle, namely the Swami Vivekananda, Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose, Acharya Prafulla Chandra Roy, Rabindranath Tagore, Vishveshwaraya and Ramanujan Memorial Orations. We are now in the 3rd cycle and today we have the Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose Memorial Oration. Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose was a polymath, physicist, biologist, archaeologist and an early writer of science fiction. Born on 30th November 1858 in the erstwhile Bengal Presidency, he graduated from St. Xavier's College, Calcutta. He then went to the University of London to study medicine but could not do so due to health problems. Instead, he conducted his research with the Nobel laureate Lord Raleigh at Cambridge and returned to India. He then joined Presidency College as a professor of physics. There, despite racial discrimination and a lack of funding and equipment, he carried on his scientific research. He pioneered the investigation of radio and microwave optics, made very significant contributions to plant science, and laid the foundations of experimental science in the Indian subcontinent. He also invented the crescograph, a device for measuring the growth of plants. Instead of trying to gain commercial benefit from his inventions, he made his inventions public in order to allow others to further develop his research. He was not even interested in patenting his inventions. His books include Response in the Living and the Non-Living and The Nervous Mechanism of Plants. He died on 23rd November 1937. IEEE has named him as one of the fathers of radio science, and a crater on the moon has been named in his honor. The lecture today is to be delivered by the renowned archaeologist Dr. Annabel Ford from the University of California, Santa Barbara. It is indeed a great privilege to have Dr. Ford with us here today. Before we proceed, may I request Dr. Ford to be please seated at the dais. On behalf of the Institute, Rajiv Dey of the Student Senate will now offer a floral tribute to Dr. Ford. I now request Professor Mollika Sharwadikari of the Department of Humanities, who has played a key role in arranging this lecture, to introduce the speaker.
Good evening. Dr. Ford has reached the department today morning, but we have been in touch with her since the past 1 month, and it has been a totally different experience because she's been so proactive in responding to all our mails and shown so much of interest in coming to the institute that it has been a real pleasure once she reached us, and we have been interacting very, very actively for the past 1 day or so. And she is a scholar of such stature, but so humble, and that is the first thing that has struck us. I begin by doing the regular honors of telling you about her work, her academics, her activities. She got her BA, MA and PhD in anthropology from UCSB, that is the University of California at Santa Barbara. And now she is the director of the Mesoamerican Research Center at UCSB, which is under the Institute for Social, Behavioral and Economic Research. If we take a look at her profile, at her publication list, it is enormous. It goes to show the gamut of her commitment and the various aspects of the Mesoamerican society which has engaged her interest and her activities. And she's the director of the LIDAR Archaeological Survey, the El Pilar Belize, Guatemala. And these are the areas where she works mainly, though of course in the morning when she was in our department, she was speaking about the wider area of the Mesoamerican civilization about which she has been working on. And I think she began work as early as 1981. And even today, she is very active. In fact, when we got in touch with her last month, she was in Brazil. So she is an active worker, and that is the flavor that comes across in all her in her lectures and whatever she speaks. Her transformative activities, which are listed, is very, very essential for understanding this Mesoamerican society. She has created and maintained award-winning research sites, which are the ones that are listed here, and also another one which is called the MayaForestGardeners.org. And if you go to these sites, which I did in the past 1 month, it's a storehouse of information, and it's almost as if, even without going to the Mesoamerican areas, we have already traveled there. She has been widely recognized in academia. She is listed in the eminent scientists of today in Who's Who in America. In 2003, she won the UCSB Alumna of the Year Award. In 2000, she got the US Senate Congressional Recognition for Outstanding Community Service. And she was named the Educator of the Year, and also the Amigos de El Pilar Belize, Guatemala Certificate of Recognition. She has got several other awards, and her activities, her engagements, these will go to show the level of her commitment. But apart from this, Dr. Ford also has other areas of interest which is very, very interesting. For instance, the human-environment relationships, complex societies and pre-industrial economies, settlement and subsistence systems, issues of resource and heritage conservation, and women in academia. In fact, today morning we were talking about this, and she was wanting to make a comparison between American societies and ours in India. I'm sure that the lecture that we are about to hear is going to be extremely rewarding, but I think it will not be enough. I leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Molikadi. May I now request Dr. Ford to deliver the third AJC Bose Memorial Oration.
Thank you for that introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here and be on the invitation of all of you and have a chance to share some of the kinds of work I've been involved in, starting as just a simple archaeologist, but always with interest in the people, and realizing that through the landscape of the people who are actually living on the landscape that I am surveying, I can learn quite a lot, and I hope today that you will get that feeling. So we're halfway around the world from the world I both live and work in, although you can't see. Well, you can probably see Santa Barbara on this. Let's see. Santa Barbara's about here, and we're way over. Well, I guess you can't. I don't know what this doesn't look quite like it's Calcutta, but anyway, you can see that we're quite far away. It's more than 12 hours and 30 minutes when I talk to my husband, and he doesn't know whether to say good night or good morning. It's the opposite, whatever he's going to say. But I think that these are both places where great civilizations flourished, and I just spent about 8 days with the Archaeological Survey of India in Ahmedabad and in Dholivira, and there we talked about these civilizations, compared them. We had Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, China, and India as representatives there. It was really a very enlightening experience for me. I try my best, and if I make mistakes, please tell me. I want you to understand the chronology of this region where I'm working. It's called the New World, not simply because human entrance into the area was less than 20,000 years ago, but also that the two continents didn't join until so long ago, like the Miocene, and that's, let's say, around 3 to 5 million years ago. So it's really quite new when you look at the subcontinent of India and the greater Eurasian area. So this is a world that was not settled in the same way by plants and animals, and certainly not by humans. In the region where I'm working, let's see, you can see that they were archaic hunters and gatherers when you have metallurgy beginning, and that the about you, but I don't see this so clearly. I don't know. It's not very clear. Oh, but I don't know how you can make it in focus. Well, while people were just getting around to be settled, the Harappan civilization is in its mature phase. When we have our first monuments coming up, that's when you have the classical period and so forth. But the period I'm mainly interested in. Well, the main period I'm interested in is this late classic. And when I talk about the kinds of settlements I'm looking at and the kind of land use, it's in that period that it's most exuberant and most importantly using the landscape. But also we have the post-classic. All the main monuments where I work are neglected and fall into disrepair. Not that people were left, they were still there. And then we have the last time period, which is colonial, and it coincides with the movements of Europeans and their efforts, which you certainly know about. In India, it was in this area it was a brutal conquest. The Spanish came in, they they changed everything, and within 50 to 100 years, 90% of the people who lived on that continent were dead. So, like, if you count 1 in 10, that was all the amount of people that went forward to keep the legacy that that we now are trying to save. So, think about, again, while people are practicing much more complex systems in the old world, they arrived into the New World and settled the entire region from north, from the Arctic Circle to Tierra del Fuego, by 12,000 years ago. They were all, this is during the changing, but basically the Ice Age. They came with the skills of stone and fire, very important land use management techniques, but no metal. They retained that Neolithic view of the landscape until the time of the conquest. They expanded fairly rapidly, just being hunters and gatherers. Of course, the animals in this area were unfamiliar with humans, so you can imagine how quickly the things were changing. But at the same time humans were coming in, temperature was changing. It was going from the Ice Age to a warm period, and by 8,000 years ago it was already a very, very warm period. So it changed from arid and cold to warm and wet in this area where I'm working. They adapted to the landscape, getting to know that geography and geology and where things were and where things weren't, moving from the Pleistocene into the Holocene. A change, as I mentioned, that went from cold to warm. And they established, and I mean this counts for the hunters and gatherers of California to the Andean South America as well as Mesoamerica. They were adapting to that landscape, getting to know it, and in a way that was very different, without draft animals, without the wheel. But saying without is really to undermine the value of their skills on this landscape. So this is the region I work, and my area of research is right here. This study area is the lowland area where the Yucatec Mayan language is spoken. There are 4 Mayan languages, Yucatec, Lacandon, Mopan, and Itza. The dominant one today is called Yucatec. You can hear it spoken when you go to the Yucatan of Mexico. Here. However, the languages in Belize and Guatemala were suppressed so consistently that they're almost not used today. There's El Pilar. So this is where I found this site, and it gave me a privilege to think of all the different aspects in this interdisciplinary theme, following the namesake of this lecture, that very interdisciplinary. I use geography, geology, volcanology, economic botany, biology, archaeology, anthropology, ethnography. You could name it. If you have something, or we're just talking to the mathematician, we're going to bring in the idea of accounting and find out how the Maya did accounts. Very salient feature, very important feature of the Maya lowlands is this very distinct annual cycle. A lot of people think, I don't know what the rainfall here is, but it's 2,000 millimeters a year in the area where I'm working. However, it's not delivered evenly. You have a monsoon here, so it's uneven as well. In the Maya area, we actually have 3 time periods. It's interesting, it really shows up. We have this rain, even though it looks like a small amount, it's quite significant in the agricultural cycle. They have this little period which is called canicula, or dog days, and then they have this period which is actually cold rain. It spreads out longer, but it's really not, April, I'm looking at, yeah, that's right. And then this period, which is the dry season, largely a 3-month period where there might not be any rain at all. So you think about using the landscape. This is a platform of limestone, which is all very porous. Surface water is almost non-existent across this whole region. And it doesn't matter how much rain, if you don't figure out how you're going to capture it, that dry season is going to be a very difficult time. Agriculture is rainfall agriculture. They're not irrigating, and they're not making any agroengineering features on the landscape. They are using skill and hand labor to farm. That's just pointing out El Pilar again. One of the major things you notice by the Lake Classic, but it goes back in time at least another 1,000 years that we can be sure of, are their aguadas, or the reservoirs. And here you see Nabuinik Makina. It was the power of water that was imbued in the leadership. And this glyph is a prefix for a very important leader at Tikal. His name was Water Lily Lord. And water lilies purify water that is in tanks or in reservoirs. And here you can see 2 reservoirs in the upper part of Tikal. And this is a map of Tikal, very nicely done. You can see that the drainage goes from the highest, collecting off of all these plazas. All the plazas and the sheds of the temples are pulling in, capturing the water that are then directed here, and they go down to these reservoirs, all the way down to this main reservoir at the bottom of the hills. All of these dots are reservoirs that still hold water today. Every Maya center had their reservoirs, but these ones, if you take a walk around Tikal, you would always find water permanently. Very, very interesting to me, because there's a thing here called, you probably can't see it, this line is the survey I did in 1978 called La Brecha Navela. I cut a line 30 kilometers long connecting Tikal and another center, Yasha, looking at Maya settlements away from centers, looking at the inner site region. And all the places I set up camp, all of those were reservoirs that were created by the Maya and associated with temples and plazas. So the Maya, even though they were no longer maintaining some of the whole thing, and some of those reservoirs still held water and controlled the behavior of archaeologists, let alone those were lumbering and people who were cutting chicle, that was chewing gum, and so forth. Always impressed me. But while water is really important, one of the most critical things that the Maya had was cultivable land. And while centers are often thought to emerge where and draw people in this area the population is quite dispersed, and the centers grew where people were most. And so it was cultivable land that was most important, and capturing water was one of these skills and knowledge-based factors that kept the Maya on the landscape. Now, the dry seasons, as the populations grew and these centers captured more attention of the landscape, the dry season reservoirs, I'm sure, became one of the most important things, drawing people in that part of the year, but not all year. They had a range of different ways they used that landscape. In fact, when you're conserving water in this landscape, as I mentioned, if you clear it, you will be exposing it to drying out. Without trees, you won't have shade, you won't be building soil, and you won't be capturing water. And so land cover is one of the most important things. In the middle picture is a plowed field in the area where I'm working, and I talked to Alfonso Sul, one of those master forest gardeners that I've known, and he was in the agricultural ministry for a while when he was working. He's retired now. He said he never saw a plowed field that didn't have erosion, and he never saw a Maya field, which is called a milpa, that did. And you can see on the Lacandon milpa cycle, you can see in this picture above here, here's the field dominated by maize with a lot of other things. Here's a regenerating one, and here's the high forest. All of those phases were phases that were a part of that cycle, cleared, growing back, and the high stand forest. It's a cycle, and by a cycle, it's running, so we have the annual cycle of the way the rain comes. So when it's dry, when there was time period when it wasn't dry, it's really not profitable to clear it and burn it. But this is Sweden. It's often considered very bad for the environment, but it's really not that at all. In this case, it's very structured, very important. It's integral to the system of the tropics. It's built as a system of knowledge-based that produces good food, maintains good construction materials in the perennial component, and cycles. Never any one time is there the fields next to each other cleared. So it starts with the short-term annuals. These annuals will be like the maize, beans, squash, chile, those very much, chiles here were domesticated 10,000 years ago and became very much a part of the repertoire of the agricultural communities of Mesoamerica. But that's only 4 years. And then really in those 4 years they're building towards this perennial component that will have bushes and trees, and by the end of the cycle they're able to harvest wood for building, lanais for wrapping up things, fronds for roofs, fruit to eat, medicine to use. All the things that you can imagine you need in household will be the meat market on the ground, the fruit trees and the fruit stand on of that tree, the medicine on the ground, the vines for wrapping coming down from the trees. Very complex system that was really aimed at a perennial tree farm, you could say, but not one kind of thing, because you can't just eat, here you couldn't eat just rice. You don't live by maize alone. You need a lot of different things to have your home economy. It's really important. And even so we have the cycle of the annual cycle that has essentially 2 growing periods and 1 clearing period, although sometimes they do plant in the dry season certain things that can grow in that time. And then that's embedded in this sort of 20-year cycle that is moving the annuals, which looks like shifting cultivation, but really belies the kind of effort that you find happening in these perennial components. So it goes from an open field into a standing forest, but that is an aim and a destination of the cycle itself. It's not abandoned. And that, when you start thinking of it on the landscape, this is a picture redrawn from a National Geographic article. And if it looked like this, my forest gardeners say, where's the water? If you don't have shade, you won't have water. And they also think it looks more like the Mennonites, which are their fields of Mennonites in a nearby community. So they use plows, and they have dominated and dried the landscape. And this would never be successful if you did this and you couldn't support a great civilization. So let's see. So, but when you start looking at it, it's dynamic. It's got open areas, building perennials, and high stand forest, but it's not static. It's not like this is where the fields are, like the Indus perhaps. It moves, it changes. You have cleared areas, you have upland areas, and that's why from the, what I call the ecological imperialist size, that is the people from Europe, the United States, everyone who condemns swiddening, they condemn it as a way of life, because they see that they see it clearing the forest, but embedded systems are actually part of that forest. They're not separate. But if you are a person without land and you need food, in 3 months you would have food, you would clear and plant your maize. But if it's your land, you're going to be developing and investing in it, and that's how it was happening, of course, in the Maya period. But really, it's not a static. It's really important to think that 4 years clearing is an investment in a forest garden. I want to give you a little story about the pollen and the rainfall. It's a very significant combination, bringing in cores that are paleo-environmental cores that look at pollen in a sequence over the years, or in this case, 12,000 years, and also looking at the precipitation chart that comes from a Cariaco Basin, which is just north of Venezuela in the Circum-Caribbean. And it's used here as a proxy for rain in the area where I'm working, because this is recording the way the winds bring up rain into the Yucatan Peninsula from the southern part of the Caribbean. But what you can see is here's the cold and dry. Very few trees that are called the megathermal trees that actually are those which are dominating the Maya forest today. And you can see that the rainfall is rising. This is titanium, a measure of parts per million, which are listed over here, that record runoff into the sea in this case. And you can see where the runoff is recorded very high. We see the change from arid to megathermal, so we know it's hot, and we know there's a lot of water. So this is the warm wet period called the Holocene thermal maximum. And that is the time period that really initiates what the tropical forest could offer both humans and the landscape and the animals that are in this area. But here, around 4,000 years ago, a big change happens, and this is what I call climate chaos. And you can see the lines go up and down and up and down. Animals, plants, and people had to really reevaluate how they were using the landscape, and this is the impetus and the catalyst that creates the settlements that become the Maya civilization. And lucky, this has been casually, I would say, but just directly interpreted. This is the one tree. It's called Ramon, or Brosimum alicastrum, and you can see it goes from high to low and then goes high. This is the time period of the Maya development, and that has been interpreted as the Maya destroying the landscape, taking the trees away. But in fact, the trees, 98% of them are not pollinated by wind, but pollinated by animals, and they will not go over to a lake and fall down into the lake. So if you don't say achoo, it's not going to be in the lake. So what this is not, they said it becomes savanna, but that's not true. These are bushes, these are forbs, these are plants that can grow on the landscape that indicate going back into the phases of forest. But when humans are on the landscape, they do impact the landscape. But this is not impacting it by loss of trees. And hopefully, if my plan is right, here is a list of the dominant trees of the Maya forest. Only one, and that's the Ramon, the Brossum malacastrum, that is wind pollinated. So by recognizing it in the pollen record, well, that's good, but they won't see any of these other ones unless by fortuitous accident, because they are dominated by animals. So 98% of the plants of the tropics are insect pollinated, for example. So recognizing Brossum malacastrum, it's definitely edible. It's a good tree and very important for arboreal animals. But you don't live by Ramon alone. Look at what else we have here. Hog plum is an edible. This is for wood. This is corozo is for thatching. This is actually a small palm used. It's called a scoba in Spanish. It's for making brooms. This is also a good leaf for palm. This is construction. This has many medicinal qualities. This is a fruit. Construction, fruit. Mahogany, very important internationally. Became one of the extraction processes in the colonial period. Ramon, wild mamey, another fruit, another construction. Canepa is a fruit. Zapote negro is a fruit. Zapotillo. Chicle, a wonderful fruit. This is a fruit that is tastes a little like something that we were eating at lunch, but it's a very sweet fruit, small, about this big. But the tree also is a very heavy, good hardwood, can be carved, is made into lentils that were used in the temples, and also provides a latex that turns into a gum. You've heard of chiclets? It's from chicle. That's the origin of that term. So I would not expect to find any of these in the pollen. So I wouldn't look to pollen as a one-to-one relationship. I would like to interpret it through the lens of human activity. And here are the activities we want to examine. Here is a home garden. Those are chiles in the front, drying, getting ready for a local market. But look at the house and look at the trees that is right embedded in its little home garden, a forest garden. These also will have a small field that they will have products that they need to use more right at home. But in distances of maybe no more than 7 kilometers, you will find other fields that are in this cycle that I was talking about. They have very special people who really understand wind and fire. In fact, this is called a fire tender, but Yum Ikob is wind. So he's really a master of wind. They backfire in the area where the wind is going. So when they actually start the fire, it stops before, that's very good. Thank you. I was just thinking. So this is a very skilled way of using the landscape. And this is one thing I see being lost. People are still burning, but they're not burning with skill. Now you may look at this and say, oh my goodness, it looks like a moonscape. But look at all the trees that are still there. And I don't know, I haven't seen the slash and burn here, but when I gave this a similar lecture to the archaeologists, they said I should go when I go to Assam, that there are Swidners there, and they actually practice a lot of the things I'm talking about right now. And one of the things I note before this is burned, all these stalks are about this high, and they're cut in a slant. I guess that's easy to cut. I always thought it was simply to impale survey archaeologists, but all of these resprout, and they hasten the regeneration of that field into a forest. So this is not a destructive technique if done in the traditional way. It's a rocky place. People in the old world are used to plows, arable land. There is no arable land where the Maya live. Arable means plowable. These people plant with a digging stick and dropping the seeds they want in the little hole of the digging stick. And you can see it's very rocky. You couldn't possibly plow in this. So when you look at modern assessments, like the UK was in Belize. Belize was once British Honduras, and they did a wonderful study of the land use, or no, prospective land use, the soils in the area where I work, and I use it with my geographic information system. But they discount the areas. Everywhere where the Maya live would be an area you can't use, and everywhere the Maya don't use, that was considered arable. It's almost one-to-one opposite. But look, this is like 2 months later. Would you consider this look like a moonscape? It's beautiful, and if you look closely, you can see squash and other things growing in here. They have a basket full of maybe 100 colchigens that can end up maybe 30 to 60 in a field. This is definitely complicated, but when you naively look at it, it may simply look like maize because it's definitely dominated by maize. But some of the first products that would be put in are squash with big leaves that conserve water, and the stalks of the maize are for climbing beans and other plants. And inside that forest, you'll see, in that milpa or the field, you'll see lots of other things. And studies have been done by agroforestry people to show that some of the things, the weeds there, are actually allelopathic, and they do things like attract nematodes that otherwise would eat the corn, or eliminate the fungus that grows on the beans because another plant is preferred. So really very sophisticated knowledge, not to be discounted, but soon to be gone. Of course, they have they reap the fields, and like I said, they can have up to 2, sometimes 3 plantings a year, but one is the most important, the biggest planting. And then these are planted maybe 4 years in a row, and then during that time, these trees that are there and the ones that are resprouting and ones that might just show up are nurtured into the next phase. So here's one. You might think there's nothing growing, but we went out and got a yam. Just right. They know everything. It looks like, they just made magic. They walked out there and picked up a yam. That was our dinner. Here's one where you can see that Chaco's in his field. That's all squash, holding down the moisture as he's beginning to use it. But here it is, starting with, of course, banana as a global. We're looking at global forest gardens today. We have mango. We have citrus, and here we can see we have banana. So he's using banana as a short-term perennial to build his long-term forest garden that will be coming up. He invests a lot of time. This is a siricote, which is a fruit, which I really like. And I've learned from the women that the leaf, which is very rough, is used for cleaning pots and pans. I thought it might use for, beauty product. But he wants it for his for the wood. It's a very, very beautiful wood. So he's trimming off the side branches to make sure that it goes straight. Now that's an investment. That's not abandonment. That's an investment in that landscape. Here is one of the orchards, and you can see that I can see mango and citrus and allspice, but we can also see a few little bits of the earlier phase of the bananas. So this is probably about a 7-8 year orchard, ready and already producing quite a lot of food. But as you can see, lots of annuals below, by the way. These would be contributing to the pollen. Here is an allspice garden, and this person who did this one wanted principally allspice. Allspice is native to the Maya forest, and he says he's a rich agriculturalist because when he harvests his allspice, he really can get, it's one of his main crops. And then all of these Maya farmers have up to 50 or 60% of their land area not used in the field rotational system in that cycle, but as a reserve. But this isn't a reserve that they aren't touching. This is a reserve that they're going to use for their thatching, for their wood, for other kinds of products that they find, probably even animals, because it's creating habitat as well. And what's interesting is that the Maya, of course, did not have baling wire and hammers and nails, when they assembled houses, they used vines. And the only place that vines grow are in the shade of trees like this. So if they had perishable structures, they had to have ways to assemble those. And the vines or lanais are a very important component of these reserves. This is a mahogany tree he's standing in front of. If that sounds all fanciful, and I've been told by a couple of people, and I saw in print recently by my new book, that I'm just very romantic, but it's not. This is something I see. I'm looking at literature on this. Here is a place called Tikul in northern Yucatan. I encourage you to look at maybe this block because and watch what happens. This is cleared. This is from Google Maps or Google Earth. Now look at. This part is cleared, so this part is growing back. And then this one is completely changed as well. And this is just a 10-year period that I picked. So it's still going on. This is the home part of the garden. And here's a case where you can see the peach is where a friend of mine works. You can see the fields in the outer areas or the outfields. So this is the infield, outfield system. I shared this morning, but I want to share it again. You all come from a system that had viceroys, and the people who came in and colonized here did not understand the local lifeways. And here in the case of the Maya, they had their home garden and they had their maize field infield, and they also had their outfields. And yet the viceroy here just did not like it. It didn't look like Seville. It was unpleasant. It looked dirty to him. And he made a rule that prohibited or attempted to prohibit the way of life that was so critical to conserving water, building soil, and maintaining biodiversity and food for people. And he says he makes this edict in an ordinance in 1552. They should not sow any milpas, so any fields within the town. They should construct their houses in the Spanish mode, that is close together, not far apart. And that they shall be clean and without sown land or groves, and if there were any, they will be burned. So the very lifestyle, life way, the food for the people, and for that matter for the Spanish, would be eliminated by actually imposing this edict. While at the same time, the Maya continued for the last 500 years. It's been the mainstay of the traditional Maya. It's only the imposition in the last 50 years and the change of globalism and Starbucks and McDonald's and all these things that are homogenizing and forgetting some of the basics that are so important. This is an active, constant, and vigilant landscape management system that has words that reflect the most, all the skills, and even what I say cultivating biological capital, that is really nature. They do not have a word that separates nature from culture. And here there are some of the gardeners ready to help me and help you and show us what we can do. And here is just an example of the 18 forest gardeners, and we're in this little school garden that's been established by the group of forest gardeners, and we have a book that I'm going to leave for the library here on the forest garden that shows how they work. You can see that the average age is not young, but look at what they have. The milpas, the field, 8% of their landscape is that, 3% is a nursery, 3% is pasture. Reforestation, so that's that second time that's destined to be a forest, and you can see as reserves nearly 60%. So these people are really the ultimate conservationists of the Maya forest. Just to give you a sense of it, that all sum total, I have recorded more than 650 plants that break up into trees, shrubs, herbs, lanais, epiphytes, palms, ferns, grasses, and other species. So this is something that is really really a remarkable system. And I think we need to think about how we call upon these traditions today. I mentioned the climate chaos that brought together people in such a way that they had to change their use of the landscape into living more together and ultimately building the civilization of the Maya. And look here, temperature. This is the temperature has gone up 2 degrees centigrade. I seem to have all this trouble with it. Anyway, gone up 2 degrees centigrade, and we're starting to hit climate chaos, troughs and peaks in precipitation. If you think it's impossible to create a forest garden, here's the house that I have. In 2005, I actually rented a house there, and in 2 years, this is the forest garden. Now, this is the plant, the tree right here. For some reason, at the end of my talk, seem not to get anything, but the tree on the right there is what I call a South Asian almond, and I think I saw one with you, and it's still growing over in the other one, but I've got a lot more trees. The people that helped me was the Forest Garden Network, and so you can do it. Here's my house today. My neighbors don't have trees, but I have lots of trees. I have fruits, I have teas, I have medicine, I have flowers, I have herbs, anything. And I even get visits from people who want something from me. But I said, I give you it, but can't I give you a little stick so you can grow it too? Oh no, we'll just come by. Get it. The forest wants to grow. My husband, I bring this in for you, went on walks. I have doggies there. I have 2 dogs that always need to have walks. So he would take the walks since I was so busy. And he started recording all the refrigerators that were abandoned in the yards all over. So he took a bunch of pictures of refrigerators. But this one I liked because the ceiba tree, which is a cotton tree, very similar to ones I've seen here, is growing out of a refrigerator. So, I mean, this is not a forest. If you invite it back, it will come back. So, I mean, the idea that it is destroyed is a simple invitation and engaging with it. Don't mow the lawns, don't have cows, stop plowing, or at least in some areas. But how are we honoring this? And this gets into another part of my work. Here we have a picture that was drawn with camera obscura in 1830, and then the same one on the right. I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but everyone know about gravity here? I mean, you guys are engineers, right? So engineers, if you use gravity, it's because gravity is not a good idea. It's the law, right? Things will fall down. So I have a little trouble with the picture on the right. How did that happen? I think that's kind of a lie. It's not a faithful representation of what the Maya would have left. And I know for a fact that without the wonderful fronds of the trees dispersing the water and shading these monuments, this side one over here is a picture I took in 1972, and this other one is in 2012. Very clearly, the mask is no longer there. So I was able to see a mask in 1972, and no one will see it now. Now, they think they have protected it, but what they've done is destroyed it because it's not in the shade. When you have things in the hot sun, salts are drawn out to the edge. These biofilms take up the salts and drop acid, and acid and lime turn into powder. The powder is actually the source of the good soil that brings the trees. But we need to know how to ally ourselves with the forest and the monuments if we want to share these monuments with humanity, because this is also a World Monument Heritage. Just quickly, I want to mention a project that I've just launched. I don't know if people use the GIS here in geography or mapping, geology, or finding. I mean, I know a person that worked with me with USGS was a person who helped the Geological Service quantify the value of potential mines for, this was gold in the Rockies, and he did it by looking at the types of rock and the types of ores that had come out in a predictive model. So I know that GIS can be used in engineering as well. This is called the Maya Forest Atlas Portal, and I have the access code up there. And this, you can go in and look at my different landscapes that I've mapped and created with the Geographic Information System. It's a little funky right now because it's ArcGIS, which is Esri product, This is like a sub-beta product, so I see some things still not right. But you can look at the local, site local and regional data. And I think I have one example. This is what it can open up to, and I have another. This is a short way to get to this. And this is the LiDAR that I'm using to map and superimpose my map of El Pilar there. This is really helping my survey work. And anyway, I want to close by saying this is El Pilar, a wonderful living museum that we can actually help share with different people from afar. You can see it in my website, as was introduced by Molly, and then also coming there. So this is what you see today, and we hope that in the future we'll see something that's archaeology under the canopy. So thank you very much. Yes.
What says referred to by saying megathermal plants?
What is a megathermal plant? A plant that can't grow when it's freezing. So I think the temperature is maybe 10 degrees Celsius has to be above. I can't have any problem. I might be wrong, but it can't be freezing. So if you have it freezing, that plant will thrive.
Yeah. My next question is, what the data that we're talking about, how much work is that in the cell and the means?
Okay, El Pilar is at S265. Place where I live is about 60. As you move north, it's quite a bit lower, so probably it's 40 to 60 when you get up in the north. It drops quite flat. I think I have it somewhere next to my grading, so people can see. I have the grading of the rain, but I don't show the grading of the.
Because of the global warming, which the nature's language and gases are unpredictable, absolutely. And do you apprehend the terrain to be inhabited by people?
Oh yeah, well what you mean? Well, if you can have tropical storms that don't move, and this area has been really inundated, flooding, but it's not regular flooding. But we do have hurricanes.
Because it's going to adversely affect the product.
Oh yeah, here. Yeah, but I think that that this area has experienced a lot of this, and in fact, that's why trees resprout and they respond to fire. That they are quite adapted to disturbances, and flooding is kind of interesting. I have a whole study where I did a predictive model, and settlements that I've mapped predictively do not locate closer than 500 meters to any stream, forget the river. So clearly there's a perception that water is a danger. But there's lots of relief where I'm at. It's not something, and of course it's a base is limestone. So flooding in those areas is not, is less common, but of course where people are settled now, the flooding is very common. Yes?
This is all natural gardens.
Well, directed by the mind.
Obviously,
Oh yes.
they are doing some plant genetics, say these rare plants and their foods. You don't know all these foods and but in countries where the ponds are less, food are less, vegetables are less, they are also aspiring to get natural foods.
Yes.
So what service they are doing? They are botanists, they are chemists, they are using manures or growing more.
You mean
against nature, or
the
just depending what nature gives.
Oh no, they're balancing both. Of course, like the man who likes allspice, he's making sure that if he sees an allspice, it's there, and he might plant allspice. But they're working with nature. It's a balance. It's not simply natural and let things grow, and it's not simply planting everything. But it's a combination of the two. And I was out in one field with a man, what I call a master forest gardener, and I'm asking him, what tree is this? What tree is this? What tree is this? What tree is this? And we get to this one, and he says, well, this is the siricote, or whatever it is. I said, well, what's the tree right next to it? Oh, that was to build competition. And then he goes, there was no more tree anymore. He says, it's fine. So competition, I think of competition, I apply for a grant, And I don't want competition. I want to get the grant. But to make the tree strong, it needs competition. So he left things depending. But at that point, after I asked, no. So some trees are there simply as a service tree, and then obviously they can cut them. It's subtle and sophisticated, I have to say. And I have not learned everything. For example, what you would have thought after I lived 9 months in the jungle with people that know the jungle that I would have figured it out, but I didn't. I was going out and getting my archaeological sites and doing my excavations and dating them and whatnot. And so I worked then 2 more years in the area where I'm concentrating now, and I wanted to go back to this one site where I found obsidian. Obsidian is from 350 air kilometers away, so finding it in the Maya area is something. And I wanted to go back and hear the men that had been working with me. I wasn't thinking about forest gardening at this time. I was thinking about my obsidian. And I said to them, let's go back to this place, and I described where it is, and they had big question marks above their head. They're looking at me. What are you talking about? I'm describing where you drive across the swamp, and then you go up the hill, and you pass the quarry, and you see this road, and they're just like, they walk. They don't drive. Those things don't have the same meaning. But all of a sudden, when I got out, I said where we drove, we got out of the car, we walked, and it described some things that we all noted. And then one guy says, ¿Dónde estaba el aguacate? Where the avocado is. And everyone next door, why did you say that? We'll take you there. But if I had said where the avocado tree was, and I know what an avocado tree was, but that's not how I recognized it, So they're out with me, we're surveying, and they're saying, well, if there's an avocado, we can get avocado at a certain time. So it's very, it's a beautiful system, really. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
So, sort of a political question. To what extent is the government supporting
The project?
system fund?
The forest gardening?
Yes.
No, the government it's really a problem because they look at slash and burn as a very bad system, and they also look at the villagers with some, I don't want to say contempt, but they feel that they are the knowledgeable persons. And so we have a real disconnect between the international efforts for conservation and the local people's actual knowledge. And in a way, I said this morning, I'm a cheerful pessimist. I will act as if I can make a change. I don't know if I will, but I really spend all my time talking about the forest garden. If I am on the news or interviewed in Belize and Guatemala, I always bring a forest gardener and I call him a master forest gardener because they always call me Dr. Ford. What do I know?
But then you must be getting the UN support, right?
Pardon?
But then you must be getting that UN support to safeguard the interest of this.
Yeah, well, I get support for my research, and there are people. I want to answer another part because they have helped. I have inspired both countries to create a protected area around all of El Pilar. It covers 20 square kilometers. I finished surveying 10. I have 10 more to go. So there is a very, very big interest in conservation of the forest and conservation of the monuments. That's the attraction, and of course it's a destination for people who are tourists. And they want to encourage the idea. They like the archaeology under the canopy. It doesn't mean it's much work for them, but they don't understand the forest garden in its way. And in fact, assume that everyone is in the village is a forest gardener, which is not. It's just like us. We have smart people and dumb people, Yes?
Question is, if you put it in a very generic context also, now people got an impression that all these communities living there, they are not connected with the mainstream technologies, right? So
What you mean? They have electricity. They go to school. They have smartphones.
So they have smartphones.
Yes, because of course that's the jump, right? I'm sure it happened here. No landlines. I have a landline, but virtually nobody has landlines. I can text Narciso and say, how's my ceiba tree doing, or something like that. He can text me back. I can do it right now. Of course, he might be asleep. He'll be getting up. He's probably going to his forest garden in an hour.
So it's not really parallel to the
Pardon?
It's not a parallel economy.
Well, all villagers, I think, are in a parallel economy, but they're all connected in some way or another. And now, actually, it's really a neat story. I didn't have it as part of this, but in my book, I have a section where I look at different products, yields. I use maize yields from the low, medium, and high production. High production are people who the data were collected, they were definitely offline, like you're talking about. Not a parallel, completely offline. And their product was 2,800 kilograms of maize per hectare. And two examples of low and medium, one was 855 and one was 1,200, pretty much an average that's expected by farmers today. And they all were integrated. The big difference is, of course, they have wage labor. There's various kinds of requirements, like say if you are getting electricity, you have to pay that bill. So it's complicated, right?
Yeah. What do the young people, those who are below 25, what is their attitude towards gardening? I think globalization is making an impact on young people's values.
Yeah,
so
that's my biggest worry. That's why this project at the school garden is so important. I don't expect everyone to want to be a farmer. I don't expect everyone to want to, have a home garden. But it is a tradition that shouldn't be lost. And then, I can't. I'm not an ethnographer. I see resistance mostly because, the teachers, for example, have these requirements. They have to teach this test, and they don't seem to understand. Even just outdoors, bringing an outdoors component to a young person's school life gives them more imagination, gives them more opportunities. The education department and the ministry has been very encouraging, and they do want to have. They used to have a program that was called REAP. I can't remember what it stands for, but it was encouraging school gardens. But what I want is not just any school garden. I want to encourage the local traditions and the people who know that to be sharing it. And I don't want to. I'm afraid I won't be successful, but I'm going to try. And this has been going. The farmers made that forest garden themselves. We had a big problem. This addresses something of yours. They were putting in electricity on the side of the school where the garden was, and the BEL, the Belize Electrical Limited, cut. I think it turned out to be 67 trees in this garden, and it looked like rape and pillage. It was so awful. We're still in the process. The people who work with the school garden have gone and talked, and the BEL says that they're going to help, reconstitute something, and we're looking at it as an opportunity to look at regeneration. But that suggests that there is some still resistance to it. And rumors went around that I didn't want anyone to get electricity, which of course is not the case. I was delighted they were getting electricity, but they didn't have to do what they did. So it's not an easy road.
What kind of construction materials are they using apart from timber?
The village, well, of course they used to use thatch, but that goes to all the resorts now. It's more, people can't afford to have their traditional buildings. They had wattle and daub, they had the sticks, and they would put a mud and then whitewash it. In fact, they don't have those, and they have concrete block, which is so unpleasant. And it just is. It doesn't give them the same cool interior. In the time frame I've been, the traditions have dropped. Still, people know. I have people help me doing. We've done example thatchings up at the House and Forest Garden example, but these are things that can go away very easily in a generation. Did I answer? Oh yeah. And they don't have concrete there. It's all imported, either from Mexico or Guatemala. Yes. But it's cheaper, evidently. They can't have thatched buildings anymore. All the thatching has been bought by the resorts. That's crazy. But at least the resorts are supporting using it. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
So the Maya Forest Garden is going to be forever etched in our minds, I think. And thank you, Dr. Ford, for having given us such an enlightening lecture. I would now like to request one of our senior-most professors from the Department of Chemistry, Professor Goswami, to present a memento to Dr. Ford.
Everybody is much more enough more again so it's so old, so fascinating, still so young. I believe this forest and nature will help these hardworking people and hardworking scientists and analysts. They should be taught in one civilization, just not first civilization. They should also be stream because they are also denied that aspect of science.
They are scientists. They have experimented all that time, 8,000 years.
Scientists are probably the best we have a forest here.
Yes, I'm going tomorrow.
Geological country. Zoology.
Oh, zoology.
You see the animals here and you see the plants.
I'm very
And you see
interested.
that Bengal and you see us.
I'm anxious. I run across the nation.
That challenge. We are going for geological country.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do.
Because we are Bengal and sugar ones.
It's local. It's local.
Sugar one is maybe more.
Yes,
Plants and
that's
animals.
it.
I don't see much animals here.
Oh, but that's because they run away. You know, I wanted to mention that I
Plants and animals always go together.
Yes.
I came out of the forest to become so much artisans. Why is engineers?
Well, but these are like engineers of the landscape.
That's right. Basically, they are disciplinary.
We're all
They should be the fruits of